Okay, I think let's get this rolling. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the second MSP Geekcast, which is our vendor spotlight with ImmyBot. So, what we're going to do today, we're going to run through things regarding the sound of silence in terms of package and software installations. You're free to ask questions, but I'm only going to be trying to answer questions that everyone will find helpful. We're going to have a session afterwards in the v-ImmyBot channel where you can ask Darren or myself any individual questions that you may have. We're also going to run a few polls during this, and they're anonymous, so feel free to pop in whatever you want. You're not going to get shamed for answering in a particular way. So let me introduce a man a lot of you will know. He's wondrous, he's illustrious, he's a magician with a brain that plays like a YouTube video at 2 speed. It's Darren Catan. Darren, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, evening for you, I guess.
Yeah, evening for me.
So the whole point of this really is to be educational. I didn't want this to be like me shoving ImmyBot down everyone's throat. But we all have a lot of struggles around getting software installed. I find that before I made ImmyBot, well, especially now that I made ImmyBot, I spent a lot of time just getting the right software on people's computers. And it's really important for both getting new computers set up and also getting existing computers into compliance. Maybe you got a new customer and you got to get your stack rolled out to them, and you want to know how to install their line of business applications, save your technicians time and enforce consistency, things of that nature. So it's a super important thing. I think we all struggle with it with the tools that we use. And so I'm going to show you guys some of the tricks that I used and ultimately kind of bundled into ImmyBot. But this is kind of how I did it manually. And I'm hoping it's new to some of you guys. I see a wide variety of people here. So I'm expecting a wide, wide base of people, from maybe you're just getting into automation, maybe you've been doing it forever. I'm hoping that there's something here to resonate with all you guys. So from that point forward, maybe it's time for our first poll, right?
Yeah, let's get that kicked off.
See how good you guys are right now.
All right, let's start this one. Our first topic is going to be on silent install switches. So this, let's just launch this and see how this goes. So do we allow the panelists to vote, Darren, or can we just assume you're going to get this right?
We ought to, because what if they get it wrong? Although it's anonymous, so we don't know. I'm not going to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let me launch this now. Okay, so let's put that out. I believe once I end this, I can share the results of it, but it'll be interesting to see which of these options you think will allow an MSI to install silently. Oh, okay. Can you see the results coming in live on your screen, Darren?
Oh, maybe I have to answer it myself first. Oh, I hope I don't get it wrong. We didn't actually put up what the right answer was going to be, but I know which one it is.
So the majority of people getting this right, which is good to see. We're at about 3/4. So few answers coming in there. And then I'll share out. Okay, they look like they're done. So let's share those results out to everybody so everyone can see how everyone answered.
All right.
So nice to see the majority of you picking the correct answer there, which is the MSI exec/I MSI/QN. Now,
and I really do like the people that said this is a trick question you're trying to crack. I feel like that's something I would definitely do. That's on brand.
That's why I put that there, because I'm pretty sure most people think the same about me as well. I did consider chucking a few right answers in there just to throw people out, but I figured that was a bit naughty, so I didn't.
You did good.
Yeah, so what are we jumping on to now? It's interesting to see that because it's going to help us kind of guide this session based on the expertise for the people that are in here. But hopefully
it actually worked out perfect, because I said, I bet everybody in here already knows how to deal with MSIs. I don't have to talk about MSIs. And Gavin's like, well, I don't know. Maybe they don't. I'm like, let's take a poll and find out. Guess what? It looks like I don't have to talk about MSIs. So let's just focus on EXCs, which is what I really wanted to talk about anyway, right? So I guess the first question, or the first thing I wanted to talk about is, well, you were going to ask me the question, right, Gavin? So you do it.
Yeah. So when me and Darren were discussing this, we tried to put a portfolio in here of start to finish stuff that made sense for how installers work. And when I was approaching this to Darren, this was one of my first questions when we were discussing it. Why do EXE installers exist when MSI has been around forever and it works so well?
Well, in my experience, it has to do with prerequisites. If you open up a program that creates EXE installers, something like Advanced Installer, the first thing it lets you do is add prerequisites, and it tells you, oh, you need to make an EXE bootstrapper project if you want these prereqs to be installed. So coming at it from the angle of the guy creating the installer, I'm like, oh, that's why they do this. So oftentimes you'll have an MSI inside of an EXE archive, right? And you're like, why didn't you just give me the MSI? It's like, well, you don't have a mechanism for like getting my C++ redistributables from, you know, the beginning of time installed and updated on the computer. So like now we have to have this EXE thing. Whereas MSI actually under the hood in Windows registers itself in such a way that it can be cleanly removed. You know, very similar to like you know, an app in the App Store with like Apple or something, right? There's that whole, and we're not here to get into AppX and all that, although I would love to, but I don't think we're gonna have time. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. But the problem is, it is the Wild West out there with EXEs. There is no standard for how it could be built. And some software vendors don't even use an off-the-shelf packager like we're going to talk about. They'll just go and say, oh, well, I've written everything else from scratch in C++, so why not write my installer from scratch? And then like, good luck, right? So, but we're going to try to at least go over the most common ones in the low-hanging fruit for you guys. And y'all are going to have some good takeaways for this. All right. So,
absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So you often see those redistributables that often occur in those EXE installers, and you know, as a prerequisite, installing this and then this and then this. Like I said, that's too difficult to put into it. Well, you can't put that into an MSI as a dependency for the installation, which quite limits it. Really, it's a bit of a failing of the MSI standard to take into account prerequisites, and that explains why there's so many different types of EXE installers. So to move on to our next discussion point. Now we know about the types of installers, which are predominantly EXE and MSI. Let's talk about how we can install them silently. So, Darren, what kind of a quantity does MSI represent for us when it comes to silent installation?
Man, that's a hard question to ask because, like I said, a lot of times MSIs are wrapped in with these EXEs, right? So I think really the best way to move forward is maybe we could bring up that presentation and I could start running through the different packagers and how to identify them. And this is really the meat of the content for you guys. And I'll show you how you could quickly identify what script or what silent flags will work for these things. So am I going to share my screen on this?
Yeah, you share your screen, Darren. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Oh, wait, nope. Host disabled participant screen sharing. You might have to pull it up.
Oh dear. Let me. Or
just yeah, or let me.
I've changed it. Try now.
Okay. All right, I can do it. And let's do screen 1. Actually, I'm going to do screen 2 and like move you out of the way, hit share, and we pull up this. Okay, here we go. We should have had some music to go along with this. All right, let's see here. Oh, now it's got that there, this here. Boom. All right, we're here. I swear I know how to use PowerPoint. I have to type PowerPoint fully into my start bar because it wants to open PowerShell every time.
That's probably all the times that you launch PowerShell over PowerPoint, Darren.
Yeah. This is probably the first time it's ever been open. Okay, who's our enemy? The EXE install, right? We hate this guy. He's the worst. So always got to start with the easy stuff, right? I don't want to dive so far deep, and we're going to get there that we ignore the obvious. All right. Google the name of the software and the word silent. Like sometimes it just works. I've got a video of that working later and you'll see.
There tends to be three types of technician as you go up the skill level. There's your tier 1 engineer who can Google. There's your tier 2 engineer who can Google better, and then there's your tier 3 engineer who's the best at Google.
we play a game at our office. We call it getting a Google Ninja point, and essentially it's I can't find this. It doesn't exist on Google, and what that means is if someone else finds it, you owe them $20.
That's a good game. I'm gonna introduce that in our MSP.
Yeah. So even if you don't use Chocolatey, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the risks with Chocolatey in light of the recent supply chain stuff, but even if you don't use Chocolatey, the Chocolatey install.ps1 file that's inside of the Chocolatey package, which you can just see on their website, I've got a screenshot here, contains most of the information that you need. So maybe you don't feel like deploying Chocolatey to all the machines that you're trying to deploy the software to. Okay, well, guess what? That Chocolatey package has the links to the MSI or whatever the installer is, as well as the silent arts.
So sorry, Darren, to interrupt. What you're saying there is to get those silent arguments out in a quick way. If it is in Chocolatey, you can just delve into this and extract the arguments to install the software silently.
Precisely. Yeah. So this is one quick way that you can do that. And Chocolatey has a lot of stuff. So, it's a good place to check. And I see some guys talking about, unattend that SourceForge. That's been a good one. There's silent-install.net is really good. I didn't really want to list all these different runs. Just start with Google and they're just going to come up, You'll usually find it if they've got it. Here's another interesting angle that I used once successfully. Those of you who are familiar with Microsoft System Center or SCCM, well, that's used by big money people. So I had a situation once where I was trying to deploy eClinicalWorks to 100 machines at a doctor's office, and they wanted me to hand install it. I was like, that ain't going to happen. So I just said, well, we use SCCM. And they're like, oh, SCCM. Oh, you need the SCCM compatible package. I'm like, yeah. And then an hour later, I had a link in my email to an MSI that I could deploy silently. But before that, it was, no, you have to use this EXE and there's nothing that can make it go silent. So that's one angle. And you just have to consider, if you're using SCCM, usually you're big money, so they'll listen. They will have heard of it usually if they're legitimate. Unfortunately, QuickBooks hasn't gotten the memo yet, but more on that later. Okay, so this I think is really good. This is, take a screenshot of this. I am going to put it up. I have a GitHub repo. I'm going to be updating with all this information. So one interesting angle is knowing what the icons look like. You've probably seen these icons just in practice, but maybe didn't think they were relevant. Well, guess what? These can be indicative of what flags you need to use. I know everybody's seen Install Shield, but Eno setup is equally popular, although most people seem to overwrite the Eno Shield default icon. Install Aware, I've seen this, I've seen Setup Factory out there. They all have very unique icons. And so if you see that, you're like, oh, wait, hold on. I remember Darren said, if I see this icon, try these flags. That could be just a quick shortcut to get it figured out, right? So yeah, there's that. Everybody get the screenshot? Cool. All right. Then there's let me run off the command line and do /?. So here are some examples of packagers that will give you a nice, oh, here's how you do it, buddy. So W-Extract, which is actually a packager that's built into Windows, will come out like this. Install Shield will usually give you something like that. You've got Advanced Installer here. And if you reference the names here back to the previous slide, there's the pre-done known good silent flag. So you don't have to actually use your brain and think about how to build these things out. Eno's really simple. It's just, well, actually, no, that one's interesting. It's got an SP minus you have to throw in there. Whatever, you guys can look at this later, but this is pretty good. So these are the 6 that I've identified that will actually give you help, right? Bitrock, InstallMate, Eno, Advanced Installer, W-Extract, and Install Shield. All right.
And of course, you've still got the /? You can use on the MSI, which have got parameters in there that are beyond just the silent installation. You can repair packages, install, uninstall, and things like that. But it's the same switch /?
Right. Now we're going to dive into the deep end. This is where it gets real fun. All right. So there's a lot of other types of installers that weren't listed in the easy kiddie pool, right? And a lot of these don't. Some of these were listed, some of them were not. And so where I like to start is, well, let's use 7-zip, right? Let's start there. Can I just open this exe? And you'll notice, you guys have done this. You open an exe in 7-zip and you're like, oh, there are all the files. Oh, okay, cool. That's great. But then some files you open up in 7-zip and it looks like this. And that's like the actual components of a real executable, right? So knowing whether what you're dealing with is an exe or like a real exe versus an archive exe is important, because then you know like which tools to turn to next, right? So in the case that it's an archive, one of the tools that I discovered works pretty well is, let's say it was a SFX built by 7-zip, right? So 7-zip created that exe, a self-extracting deal. Well, some of those will automatically run, but maybe they don't have the silent parameter in the auto run, and maybe you want but it has other parameters that are important to make it actually do its job. So it thinks it was executed by the parent executable. Some of them will do some crap like that. QuickBooks especially wants to be installed by its parent. And the way it maintains that is by passing in some crap into the underlying MSI. So it thinks it was run by the calling application and you're not trying to script it, right? So this is one technique that I found. And there are other ways to do this that I'm going to get into later, but this one is really cut and dry if it just happens to be packaged with 7-zip. I think like the Blackpoint installer is this way. So anyway, so this is really like my favorite tool here, the Detect It Easy. I discovered Detect It Easy because I was taking apart the Universal Silent Switch Finder, and I wanted to be able to automate the Silent Switch Finder, but it was using a program called PEID under the hood, which is a UI only application. Detect It Easy has a command line version. It actually has a full, like a proper DLL like SDK you could use to link it in. And there's a new one, I don't want to say new, but Yara is like the fancy one that all of like the reverse engineering people are using now. I haven't really gotten into Yara a whole lot, but this one works really well and is my favorite. So an example of its usage is you just type DIEC, you give it the exe, and then boom, it dumps all your, what we call your PE headers. They're your portable executable headers. And oftentimes it will tell you, oh yeah, it's an installer and it's an Eno setup installer. And once you know it's an Eno setup, then you just go back to my first table and then use the Eno setup silent flags. Right?
So does that work for all installer types, Darren, or just some, or?
I would say you'll get about 70 to 80% of your installers out of this thing. It is very good. Yeah, without this, the analyzer and Emmy probably it wouldn't be anything. Now I've had to build a lot around it because it doesn't work that great with like archives. It'll tell you, okay, well, this is an SFX and that's all you've got, right? So then I had to build like this recursive, like, okay, well, it's going to extract the SFX and then it's going to go and find the installer inside of there and then analyze the thing inside of it, right? So then you kind of have to do that sometimes.
Yeah.
But,
and it's certainly a good place to start as well, because as soon as you know what the wrapper is, you can again drop onto Google again and then find for that particular wrapper. So in Eno setup or any of the ones that we've listed earlier.
Yeah, Eno setup, I took a step further. There's a utility called Eno Extract that works with older versions of Eno, like before Eno 6, which is still really popular, the older versions, that allow you to get properties like what it's going to advertise itself in as under apps and features, the version specifically that it's installing. So we actually take it a step further and grab all of that information out so we could actually build an uninstall string for it and all of that. So, each one of these things is its own rabbit hole and has its own tools. So that's why it's really important to know what you're dealing with on the front end, because then you know what tools you can use. All right. So, so let's say this right here is basically worst case scenario. What this is, if you guys aren't familiar with the tool strings, strings is a tool that you just run, you do strings and then any file and it'll just dump any sequential bytes that can be mapped into like ASCII or like Unicode or whatever, and then get those out. So what you'll end up with is this massive list of garbage where somewhere in there you may find something interesting, like you know what I actually use this for? I look for the presence of these, because sometimes the author will suppress the /?, even though the installer natively finds it, but it will still bundle the string that displays this into their exe. And just that presence of this text inside of the exe tells me, aha, it is advanced installer, but you suppressed that help menu. And so now I know what to do.
Those sneaky packaging people.
Dude, they're the worst. And you know what? You know what they say? How they say, like, never attribute to malice what could be ineptitude. I think that's what it is. Like when you go to work for a software company, they're like, oh, he's the newbie. Put him on the packaging team. And like you end up getting stuck with that. Like nobody wants to do it, which is in my opinion, the reason why most installers suck. I think interns are doing all of them. Anyway, cool. But you dump those strings out and you'll find some interesting stuff sometimes. And yeah, it's like digging through a dumpster, but you may get something good. So that's that. All right. So that's all I've got in terms of presentation, but I think that was enough to at least like get you guys, interested, and hopefully we'll raise some more questions and we can, do a discussion a little bit later on.
Yeah. So if you have any questions about any of the stuff that we've just put forward there, fire it into the question and answer, and we'll answer some of these live as we continue on. So
what we're jumping into is the question you get all the time, Gavin. You want to pose it? Why?
I do indeed. Why does this work when I run it directly in a user interface, but when I run it through my RMM, it doesn't?
Okay, we need to talk about the difference between an interactive and a non-interactive session. All right. So yeah, you're running as admin, and you double click that thing and it pops up and it's able to install, and you're like, this is great. Or even if you open command prompt as admin and you've got your silent flags figured out and it works when you run it through ISC as admin or command prompt as admin, but when you run it from LabTech, it doesn't work. There's two reasons why this wouldn't work. One of them is really easy and the other one's really hard. I'm going to start with the hard one. So in a non-interactive session, whenever an application asks Windows, hey, I need you to create a window for me, and it starts drawing the interface, well, you're kind of at the mercy of how that guy coded that when Windows will come back and say, I can't do that. Sorry, you're running in a non-interactive session. And so it's going to return an error. Well, if your installer doesn't know how to deal with that, if it says, oh, well, wait, I don't know what to do now, and it just shuts itself down, that's a good reason why it wouldn't work, right? But a lot of installers handle that situation gracefully. Every now and then you'll have an installer that when you run it in an interactive session will create the window, but if the window fails to create because it's in a non-interactive session, it'll just suppress the rest of the windows that are going to get created because it knows it needs to install silently. Not all installers are that smart. In fact, I would say the vast majority of them are not that smart. So if you're in that situation, man, you're in for a hard time. Your best bet is to really use some of these tools that we have here to see if there's any hope of suppressing those windows from coming up. And if there's absolutely no way, because you're dealing with some really obscure software that has to be hand installed, I would start looking at repackaging it with AppX, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. Some people brought up, oh, why not use like Auto IT to make it like a little interactive thing? Oh my God, I've wasted more hours doing that probably than figuring out silent stuff, just getting the number of tabs right and the control keys and the loops, and oh, what if it loses focus or something happens outside of that? Like, I would really recommend not trying to like automate a manual process. That's my experience. Your mileage may vary.
And it's also like based on the session that it's running in as well. And I think some people can think that the system session is some magical unicorn of a session that's nothing like the standard user consoles that run when people are logged on. And one of the things that I want to put forward when we're talking about this system or user divide, a lot of the time, especially if you're using something like ConnectWise Control, you can go into Backstage, and when you launch something in Backstage in Control, it launches in the same session that your RMM would tend to use when it's running. I know that would certainly be the case for ConnectWise Automate, and I'm sure it's the case for a lot of other RMMs that run in the system context when they are launching these things. So it's a really good way that of figuring out whether this is a you problem or whether it's a problem with the actual installer, because it behaves exactly as it does when your RMM launches it. So that's something to bear in mind.
Well, and I'll just throw a couple of caveats to that in there. If you're going to be doing it through Control, I actually hate Backstage in Control, and I'm going to burn me, right? Okay, but the reason is because
burn the witch.
Because you can't open ISC, it doesn't render properly in the Backstage. So if you've got these elaborate PowerShell scripts that do these installs like I like to write, when you go to paste it in, it'll get all jacked up at the command line, and then your script doesn't work right. And you think it was your script, but really it was just because you pasted it in the backstage. So instead, I just use that little command window, and you just prepend it with #bang PS, and you can put whatever you want inside of there, assuming you have your timeout configured also, and it doesn't time out. That to me is the most, if you're using it, that tool, that's the most quickest, easiest way to get a system context. And you can do a multi-line string. So anyway, that's my experience there. The other thing also, like the other way you could do this, and this you have the same problem with the multi-line, is you could do ps_exec /-i for interactive -s for system command here, and then that'll open I'm not running as, got me. All right. Oh, I got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, ps_exec -i-s cmd. Okay, now I'm running as actual system, and you're running a system. Oh crap. Well, I guess maybe I didn't do something right, because usually if you're running a system, if you try to open Notepad, it doesn't work. Yeah, that's another way you can do it. Maybe it's not -i. Maybe I have to do this. Oh yeah, I think that is it. Haha. See, Notepad didn't open because it can't create a window handle from a non-interactive session. That's it. Yeah, I should have probably not done -i. That means interactive. Okay, so that's another way you can do it. Cool. And the whole purpose, like just so you guys understand the underpinning of that, is because all these things run as services, and services in Windows by default run as system. So that's why, including ps_exec. All right.
And someone mentioned in the chat that the PowerShell plugin that they're using is excellent as well. And I just add on, if you're using Automate, and probably a number of people here are, you can use the command window that is actually in Automate as well. That can run PowerShell and command, and runs in the system context. So anything you put into there will go into the system context.
Right, but you still have the problem. What is it, a plugin you're talking about? Just like the default Automate?
I'm talking about the default Automate command prompt. So the one that you can get in the actual agent window runs as system.
It's still,
although it doesn't help you with your GUI related problems that you're likely to encounter. It can certainly tell you what happens when you execute it raw.
Yeah, again, good for one-liners, but it doesn't support multi-line execution.
No.
So anyway, yeah. Cool. All right. So we've talked about that. Oh, and then hold on. But here's the easy one, right? I said there was a hard and an easy one. So talking about the hard stuff. Let me tell you something that maybe you don't realize about Automate that sucks. Let's say you've got everything right, and your script looks something like this: start process -wait -no new window setup.exe and argument list /s. What's going to happen when you run that in Automate? Is it going to work, Gavin?
If you run it from within Automate, let me see. Start process.
I'll give you a hint.
No.
What? It's not going to work? Why? Ready?
Okay, I'll see what you're getting at.
So just for those of you who are unaware of this feature, Automate does this cool thing where if your line ends, or if your string ends in a double quote or single quote, even if there's a space behind it and multiple line breaks, and it counts for things like this too, it will strip it, and it will go in like that. It will strip the first one, and your syntax will be wrong, and your script will hang forever and ever and ever.
Unless you escape the speech marks or whatever you want to call them.
You can't. You literally can't. The only way you could do it is to make it not end with one of these. So you would have to do, so like what I do to get around this, since like, in IMMY, we're using Automate for that execution, and we have to deal with this bug, we will add a semicolon to the end, and it will add a pound like that to the beginning just to get around it. And then, and this is a gotcha, like I've seen this countless times. Why doesn't the script work? You ended or started with a single double quote. Like, yeah, that'll do it too. So anyway, just want to bring that out there, just for people who are trying to do this with Automate. It's fun stuff. All right. And that's true with command line too. We do REM in front of it, and then do like REM after for like, what do they call it? I have a brain fart right now, but that's like the comment remark. That's like comments and batch. So that'll get around that problem.
So you were talking about the easy install before we accidentally digressed into automate.
Well, the deal was, okay, the easy problem to fix was just add something to the end or beginning of it so it doesn't get hung in the script engine because of that bug.
I'm with you.
That's the easy fix.
I'm with you. It's nice to have an easy fix once in a while for automate.
Right. Cool.
So do you have anything else you want to add on system or user context, Darren, or should we move on to our?
Well, let's see. We were talking about HKey current user, right? That's a lot of installs take advantage of the fact that they're running interactively, theoretically, as the user who's going to be using it. So they'll go and stuff things inside of HKey current user, which sucks. So if you need to go and modify the registry, there's actually a great PowerShell script from the guys at PDQ that will ultimately mount all of the ntuser.dats, which are the files that contain HKey current user for each user, and will let you modify the contents of those registries. So what I've done is I've wrapped that up in a nice little function that will allow you to just go and write whatever values you want into every single user's registry. So that way you don't have to wait for the user to be on the computer for you to execute something. And we're seeing more and more of this. So yeah, I think Chrome kind of kicked it off, but now Teams it uses that Squirrels installer technology, which puts itself in as the user context, so it can self-update without local admin privileges. You're seeing a lot more of this stuff, and consequently, the config files live inside of the user's app data, or they live inside of HKey current user. But when you're running a system, you don't have HKey current user, so you have to use a trick like that, or set up a logon script, or hope that the user is logged on, and you can use like Kelvin's invoke as user module, or you could use something like like the that's just wrapping the MariaDJU thing, which is what I was going to talk about. So you could use something like that, or you could use, if you're using automate, you could say, run as user, like console, execute console, where you could say, console user 1, if you get the one who's actively running, it essentially spawns it from the LT tray instead of from the service, so that way you are running as the user. So it's not easy to do. It sucks. But yeah, those are ways you could deal with that.
And as you probably can see from the areas that we're discussing here, there's many areas of complication when it comes to installing software. There's many different paths that you can take, and there's no necessary right or wrong way of doing it. It's about looking at what that installer is doing. Is it putting per user components onto the machine, or is it just sticking it all in HKey local machine? Right. Is it putting files that exist in user locations that are needed? Sometimes what I've done that can help it when I'm really struggling is watch what an install does when you in something like process monitor, when I'm running it, to just see what it's doing and see where it's writing, because when you're running it interactively, it can behave differently than when you're not running it interactively, and you can see what it's actually doing in the background, what it's writing to the registry, where it's writing it, what files it's putting onto the disk. Is also pretty helpful to look at when things are gone right down hard street.
Yeah. So something that's really common that we have to deal with nowadays that sort of dovetails off of this is setting default PDF handlers, setting default browsers. Microsoft decided that they wanted they wanted the user to be in control of this, right? So what they did is they created the user choice hash, and what this is ultimately is it's you'll know if you go into like set file types, right? Whatever you change that, it goes and writes the special hash in the registry that's actually encoded with the user SID and the date and some other stuff that makes it impossible for you to tweak. So if you've ever had the default file handler association has been defaulted back to Microsoft Edge when before Edge Chromium or whatever, that's because something tried to touch that, and then Windows recognized, oh crap, that hash doesn't validate anymore. Something's messing with it, and it resets it back to the default handler. So anytime you as a user are going in here and you're reassociating stuff, or you're trying to do it programmatically, you may invalidate that hash. So the trick that's been out, and this has been out for a couple of years, has been using the Colby.cz guys set user FTA, but there's something newer that I want to show you guys. So this guy right here, he's awesome if you ever email him, by the way. He made this set default browser, set user FTA. He figured out how to regenerate that hash and he's got a little utility that he released that lets you do that. And this works for it works for protocol handlers too. I think those are protected by the same hash. But then this other guy came along, and he's with a company called Danny Sis. Actually, I've got the link to it right here. And he released a tool, but he wrote it. He actually open sourced it, unlike Chris over at Colby. And his initially was written in real basic. And I was like, hey, bro, do you think you could like package this whole thing up as a PowerShell script instead of like taking this like chunk of binary out of shell 32 that generates the hash and like wiring it into this basic script? And he was like, yeah, I'll think about it. And then a few months later, sure enough, he did. And it is some of the most beautiful PowerShell I've ever seen. If you get down into it, you can see where he's doing all this low level bitwise manipulation. Here he's doing like rotates and magic numbers, shift right, shift left, like, oh, it's crazy, all to regenerate that hash. And so what I'm working on right now is, what if I could combine the PDQ approach of mounting the user's registry from system and then get that user's SID and then feed it into this thing, and from system go and set the handler for every user profile that exists on the machine, right? Wouldn't that be cool? So that's something I'm working on in my spare time. But
I'd never even heard of this until we started discussing it when you put it forward. I want to double up on what you said before, Darren, because it's a really helpful thing that Kelvin wrapped and created with the invoke dash as current user. In fact, I believe he had over 1 million downloads of that from the PowerShell gallery recently, which is an obscene amount of installs. But that's really helpful when you just need to invoke something into the user session, not necessarily even a software installation. If you want to put a pop-up in there, or you want to put a file into the user desktop, fantastic resource. So I'd suggest having a look at that, even though it does relate to software installation in a way. It's still great.
Yeah, I see Derek over here is talking about active setup. That is actually a great way to get things to run as the user. Active setup is that little thing that pops up before the Windows Explorer has already started, and allows you to go and run code as it's like a logon script, but it prevents the user from doing anything. So if maybe you're trying to tweak some Outlook settings and you don't want them to have Outlook already loaded, you can set up an active setup script. The problem is active setup scripts only run once, and then it remembers that it already ran. So it'll never run twice for the user unless you increment the version. Anyway, so now that you brought that up, I'll drop that in the silent scripts, but this is a PowerShell function that that creates a VB script that then calls a PowerShell script. And I use the VB script to suppress the console window of I actually got an email from Blackpoint the other day because they saw this running on my computer, and they were like, why is this VB script calling some PowerShell? I was like, that's just some of my handiwork. Don't worry.
It's legitimate.
Totally legit. They're like, you're making our jobs really hard, Darren.
To move on, Darren, because I'm conscious of time. We've got 20 minutes left, so okay. I think we should move on to once we've got the installation onto the machine. How do we make sure that it stays on there? How do we make sure it gets to the right people, and how do we look at that?
Yeah, so I think that's actually the biggest value add that we have with ImmyBot is our rules engine. We have really clever ways of assigning things. You might say, oh, I don't need that tool because I'm just going to script it all out, but it will quickly get out of hand if you let it. Your initial install might be enough, but then all of a sudden an update comes along, and the user says, oh, well, I've got I don't want it on this computer, right? Like maybe this guy is using a laser welder CNC machine and it can't have that program. So then you've got to go in and you make an EDF and you say, okay, don't put this program on this computer when this checkbox is checked, right? But then maybe you replace that computer a little bit later, and that EDF that was tied to that machine is no longer tied to that machine, and you accidentally install the software that's fundamentally incompatible with that machine, right? So what we try to do is more focus on the association of the user to the computer. And this is something that SCCM actually does. we go in and we harvest, okay, well, what is the UPN of the logged on user? Do we see that person in Azure AD? Yes. Okay, what groups are they in? So you're able to target groups of people, and then ImmyBot will automatically figure out what machines it needs to go to, right? Because your users don't know the names of their machines, most likely. I mean, mine don't. And we don't always keep up with it. So, we might have this guy using a machine that was named after this guy that hasn't worked for that company in like 2 years, right? And so it's your tech's job to try to figure all that out. And the best tool that we have is, well, let's look at the last logged on user and automate, hoping that that guy was at work today and actually logged on the machine or whatever. So it sort of sucks. But when you get to that point, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I'm the dog that caught the car. I can get all the stuff to install silently, but how do you get it on the right machines, right? And if you look at it from the perspective of like an MSP, we've got our software that we want to go on every client's machine, right? Like maybe we're a Mimecast shop, so we push that Mimecast add-in for Outlook, and maybe we want a third-party software like a Chrome and whatever installed on the machine. Maybe Notepad++ or 7-zip needs to go on all the servers, and we want Windows updates, and that goes to everybody. But then, every client's got their own software that needs to be there. And maybe this one particular guy is the only guy that needs QuickBooks, or, this one specific computer shouldn't have this other thing, right? You have to get really granular. And I find that EDFs just get out of hand because they're too closely knit to the computer, or they're too wide for like a client, and people will try to say, well, I'm going to put it under this location. Okay, well, what if there's a computer that theoretically needs to be in both locations because whoever's using it wears both hats, right? So I find that like the traditional tools that we've used don't accommodate that. Whereas like I had a scenario where we replaced SCCM for a school we work with, and the guy comes to me, says, oh, well, I need to make sure that I get this engineering program installed to the 6th grade class with Miss So-and-so. And before I could even finish the sentence, he's in Immy. He sees, oh, wait, all the teams with all the students are in the AD groups list. He clicks it, and then all of a sudden, all the machines for all the students that it needs to be on are there, right? So I think that's really powerful.
It is, and I think now we've kind of looked at different methods to do this. I know one of the questions that is going to be on people's minds, and what they have put forward as well in the question, is how much time can this actually save me through writing my own automate MSI install scripts or my own PowerShell scripts? And I know you've put a little something together for that, Darren.
I did. All right, hold on. Let me get it pulled up. We have a YouTube video that we are going to show that I just got done today. All right, here we go.
So we can't hear any audio on that, but
here we go. How about, can y'all hear now?
No.
No?
Nope.
Oh, man. Oh.
Maybe you can just talk over yourself, Darren, and we'll have a bit of live dubbing.
All right, yeah. All right, so it's not important. All it is we're going to jump into a head-to-head, you'll see it in a second, between how you do something in Immy versus how you would generally do it in Automate. So it's going to kick off now. Obviously, I sped this up because it just takes an eternity to do certain things. So on the left side, I know I ripped through it, but it ended up being 3 minutes total to upload the file. Immy picked the right script. No changes needed to be made to the package. We hit deploy on the computer, and it went. On the right side, over here, trying to figure out why LabTech isn't downloading the file that I uploaded to the LT share. I go through multiple moving it to different folders, trying to restart services, finally get that thing going. And at the end of it, it took me 23 minutes, and it would have taken longer had I actually tried to fix the problem I broke down and put it in Azure Blob Storage somewhere, because it actually took more than like 3 hours before that indexer service just found the file and added it to the list of available things to download in IIS.
That right-hand side looked very familiar. to me, debug, wait, move on. Debug, wait, broken, start again. Debug,
Right.
wait, missing, restart.
Yeah, it takes forever. Like literally the time it took for the debugger to load was the time that ImmyBot, like, that was the full duration of time that I was able to deploy the thing start to finish. And that was only one part of it, right? And I had to wait for the thing to load multiple times. I mean, it's brutal.
So I think we're going to move, talking of the wondrous ImmyBot, I believe that's where we're going to move on to next, Darren, if you're
Sure.
ready.
Are you talking about just going into the ImmyBot channel and we can start answering questions, or
no? Do you have anything you want to go through in terms of any kind of practical demonstration for ImmyBot, or?
Well, I was kind of relying on the video for that, but then I shortened it up so much that it would probably be worthwhile for me to do that. But yeah, let me go ahead and run through just like a very simple scenario. So let's say I was actually trying to do the thing that I just did. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to log in and I'm going to say, all right, we need to deploy this software to whatever computer. So I'm going to go to software, I'm going to go to upload, and I'm going to say upload a file, grab this, and I conveniently have a folder called installer tests that contains all the installers that should just work out of the box. So let me go ahead and grab, which one should I go with? I spent a lot of time doing EXEs, and I probably should, because that was what I said was the hard thing. So let me go ahead and grab this guy. All right, so this is a Airtame lets you stream to using like the AirPlay protocol to like a TV or a computer or something. It's some people use it for conference rooms. Anyway, so this is going to upload, and I don't have the greatest upload speed, so I probably should have gone with something a little bit smaller to demonstrate it. But ultimately, once this thing uploads, it kicks off this analysis task that does all the work that we sort of went over in that PowerPoint, right? Where it's running detected easy, it's figuring out what string matches. Oh, okay, this thing is this. Okay, I'm going to extract that, and then let me get the properties out of it. Let me recommend the right script and all of that. Then it takes that output, selects the right script, and you have the option of customizing it. So let's say you do need to plug in a license key or something like that. You don't actually put the license key in the script. We give you a license file or a license value, depending on whether it's a license file or like a string, and that goes into your script. So that way your scripts can be reused across clients, and you can assign different licenses for the same software going to different computers. We had a scenario where we're deploying Foxit, but one of our clients already had their own license for it. So we kind of had to abstract that out to make it work in both scenarios. That way we could have a very concise list of scripts that we could be reused across almost any installer. And also almost all of them have the name of the packager. This is the default Bitrock. This is the default Wix. This is the default install shield. So in this case, it knows that this was an setup package, and it even gives you the link to the help on that if you wanted to, but you don't actually need it, because you're just going to go through here and you're going to say, all right, yeah, this is going to go, it's going to be called Airtame. It's going to put itself in the software table as that. I have to put a little star there on this guy. It pulled the version out of it. It knows it's an Eno package here, and you can take a look at that script, and that's what the Eno package needs. Let's say you did need to add some extra parameters. You can say copy as new, and you can start typing in, my extra whatever. But the real thing that I think you'll find as MSPs is that you probably don't have to do this all that often unless you're dealing with a client's line of business app, because as an MSP, and having worked with a bunch of MSPs since we launched back in June, and we had also our beta testers that helped us, we've uploaded a lot of this stuff already, and we have known good silent scripts for it. So if you start digging through this, like I know the big thing was QuickBooks, and I've got to do a shout out to Dimitri over there for helping us with that. And then also got one of the guys from Green Loop, who's here on the MSPGeek now. So Dimitri took a script that I had started writing with QuickBooks, and then got it to where it would work on literally any version of QuickBooks. And if you go and look at this thing, it is just a monster script. And he figured out how to self-extract it and what MSI parameters need to be fed in based on what type it was. So now literally at the end of the day, this thing's packaged. You come in here and you say, okay, Mr. Client, you're still on QuickBooks Premier 2018. We'll go ahead and deploy that on all your computers. And that way, when we set up a new computer, we don't forget it. So it's going to come in here. There's all so let's say it's QuickBooks Premier 2021. You got to put in your product number, your license number, and you tell it, desktop server, whatever. And then you just deploy it to that client. And it's that easy. And in terms of stuff that MSPs use, we've got things like Duo and Cloud Radial and Huntress and just countless tools that are really common in our field that you generally would not find in Chocolatey or Winget or whatever the package repo of the day is, or Ninite or whatever.
So to put that forward in basic terms, then what Immy is doing here is it's already got a huge back catalogue of software in it that tends to be ones that MSPs are deploying, but you can also, and that installer magic at the beginning was wizardry, just being able to put in a file there and it just automatically takes everything and just knows what to do to silently install it. So I'm sure anyone using this would have those line of business applications that we all know everyone has that no one's ever seen before. They may be from 10 years ago. There's nothing on Google, and you can just feed it into that and have that done for you, but done for you in a way that what you're demonstrating here would allow you to then install that out to the computers that you have inside ImmyBot. Is that right from the top level?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the whole point is like you could spend a lot of time packaging all this stuff manually, but we've already done the work. My real goal is to try to eliminate duplication of efforts. When we met back in 2016 at Automation Nation and I started talking to a bunch of the guys that ultimately formed this community, I realized that we're all writing the same scripts. We've all written the Office 365 install script, right? Why are we all wasting that time? Why can't there be a way that we could share this in a way that is easy? And I know that in LabTech you can export and import scripts, but there's tie-ins nowadays to systems that Automate just doesn't understand. Like, for example, the way that you go down here and you say, all right, I want this to get installed on any user that has a license for it, right? So in Immy, it just simply says get Immy Azure Auth header. Since we're already talking to the Graph API, we are now authenticated so we can go and grab the license details. And this will work for any of your CSP customers. So when you're going to onboard a computer and you say, oh yeah, it's going to be John Doe at this customer, it goes and looks up what John Doe's got. And if he's got a project license, it'll install it. If he's got a Visio license, it'll install it. If he's supposed to have apps for enterprise, it's going to install that. Same with apps for business, depending on his license. So that way your tech doesn't have to think about that and know what that client's supposed to get, right?
So this is tying into 365 in the back end implicitly to the clients that you have as an MSP.
Exactly. And then like a while back, Kelvin had published a script for like your Azure Secure Score or something like that. And that really inspired me. I was like, well, maybe I can make a maintenance task because we've got this other concept. We can deploy software or maintenance tasks, which are just kind of like generic scripts, if you will. And now we have the ability to deploy those to, here it is, check Azure Secure Defaults. And this is a different type where instead of deploying to computers now, you're deploying to your tenants, right? So you can go and instead of having to get a list of all of your customer contracts and loop over them, you would then just you would just tell Immy to do it, and Immy's going to handle looping all of them and giving you the output for each one of those. If you want to know what the secure defaults or whatever it is, if you go and check this guy out, it's literally Kelvin's code just wrapped in a small wrapper here that goes and does it. This is the whole thing.
He gets everywhere, that Kelvin.
Oh, I know.
What a guy.
I need to propose to him already.
I've already proposed. I'm taking him for my own. I don't think my wife will be very happy about that, though.
Yeah, mine either. So anyway, so this is the kind of stuff that you could do once you're inside of it. And I like to pitch Immy as more of like a next gen sort of automation tool, since we're born in the cloud and it's I don't know, it's new. And I'm sure in 20 years it'll be the old thing, right? But it's the new thing now, in my opinion. So anyway.
So we've had a few questions come in, Darren, through the topic of conversation. There was one relating to Chocolatey, something that Mark put forward a while ago that I just want to draw back to when we're talking about Chocolatey, and he's talking about supply chain attacks. And absolutely, Mark, you are 100% correct. When you are dipping into those repositories that exist in Chocolatey, the free ones, you are vulnerable to supply chain attacks. There's no doubt about it. It's the same with any PowerShell module that you run. Some of you may know I wrote the Automate API, and I may as well say this, but in one of the underlying scripts in the PSI, in the PS1, I put a note in PowerShell that says, if you actually read through the module before installing this, come and ping me and tell me. And I've had about 6 or 7 people ping me and tell me that they've seen that. You have to be careful when you're installing stuff from the PowerShell gallery. You have to inspect the code to make sure that it's right. If you are running things like LTPosh or things directly from GitHub, you should be forking that into your own repositories, checking the code, and then going forward with that. So you're spot on, Mark. They are vulnerable to supply chain attacks, and you need to be careful with them. Doesn't mean that you can't use them, though. Use the installer logic that's in there. Use the heavy lifting that people have already done in terms of this Chocolatey install.ps1 to see how to do it, but be very careful about what you tie yourself into with Chocolatey. And I actually think Chocolatey is a great product. You just have to be careful with how you use it. Would you say that's...
Oh yeah, and in the way we took the walled garden approach with Emmy, guys like Dimitri have contributed, but all of this code goes through us. We look at it, we audit it. The repo that is shared among all of the ImmyBot instances is read only for everyone but us. So we go in, we make the changes, we audit all the code, we do that, and I really do try to avoid reaching out to PS Gallery for modules. And things like that. I do use LTPosh, so I'm guilty of having done that. And there are a handful of scripts that do rely on PowerShell gallery stuff, but the end game is to internalize all of that. So that way, that the code is self-contained, there's auditability, there's traceability there.
And they are absolutely right targets for people who are targeting MSPs. In fact, they're an easy target for people who are targeting MSPs. We talk about us being attacked for security directly. And the big vendors for PSA and RMM being attacked, all it can take is just one weak link in, say, Chocolatey, and your entire agent pushes out an update that, oh look, now you've all got a rootkit or equivalent.
But I heard an argument to that is, well, why wouldn't they just go and attack Adobe? Like if they could just put an exploit in Adobe Reader's self-updater, then that's even, because now you're getting all the enterprises that don't even use Chocolatey, right? That are doing that are installing this themselves and they're leaving the auto update on. It's crazy. It really is.
I want to pick up a question from Kelvin. He says, so Immy does an analysis of the installer when you upload a package. Does that do it based on the vendor of the installer wrapper? So MSI, NSYS, etc.
Exactly. It's classifying it based on what produced it. So if Install Shield made it, if BitRock made it, if Setup made it. The way I discovered the pattern here is I had written a lot of silent scripts, and I took the EXEs. And once I discovered how the Universal Silent Switch Finder was using one of these PE header dumpers, I put it all into Excel and I said, okay, well, here's the PE headers for this EXE, and this is the script that worked. And I went and cleaned it all up, and I realized that, oh, wait, hold on. Every time that it had this PE header, this was the silent flag that worked. And then I was able to consolidate a whole bunch of my scripts. And now I've got them down to maybe 20 unique scripts for each of the packagers.
Excellent. One of the other questions that came in, can you hook into the Graph API for Azure Government?
I want to say yes. I have one customer that's on it. I haven't tried.
Okay. Next question. When running software deployments on a client through ImmyBot, does it only run one time, or can you enforce the software to auto-install for all computers on the client going forward?
Okay, so I like to parallel Immy to group policy in a way that when you go into Immy and you make what we call our deployment rules, and you say that this software needs to get installed on all computers, all whatever. A lot of people get a little nervous because whoa, I have all my computers in here from Automate. Is it going to just push this out? No. It doesn't work like group policy, in that, group policy will automatically do a GP update, if you will, and it will pull and enforce those settings. This is just the rule for the future whenever what we call maintenance session runs on the machine and we're trying to enforce the desired state. So the idea is if you wanted that to happen, you would create a schedule. And this is kind of like doing the IMMY equivalent of a GP update force, where you might select a whole group of computers and say, run maintenance on those machines, where we then evaluate all the rules that have been created and for each machine and say, okay, you get this because your primary user is that, and he's got a license for this, or, you get that because this user is in this group, or you get this because you just are for that customer, or you get this because the MSP pushes this to everybody, right? That's sort of how that works.
So one of the other questions that came in, do you have any Datto or Autotask integration in the works?
Okay, so there's 2 hook points there. The first integration that we're going to be doing is just installing their agents. And I've got a bunch of guys that have made the Datto agent, uploaded it into their own instance, but I believe the Datto agent is keyed with some information. So I can't make it like I did with Cloud Radial, where with Cloud Radial, you'll plug in your API keys and we can just figure out where to get the installer from and what the client mapping is and all of that. It's stupid easy. But with Datto, because the installer, I believe, is keyed with some information for your tenant or your customer, and I don't believe there's an API that we can pull that. So you have to upload your own. You may have to do some manual mapping with parameters. So I don't have a great integration with that at the moment, but I've had a lot of people offer to help me with it. So
probably a question from me that I think I would be asking if I was sat at home or at work watching this. What kind of level of integration does it need to have with my PSA or RMM ImmyBot? What's actually required to run it?
Well, it depends. Okay, right. So with an RMM, the integration that we initially came to the table with was give me a list of computers, give me the ability to run PowerShell against them. We didn't want to have to push our own agent to every machine. We wanted to leverage the agents that you already have. So we are able to do that with Automate. We're able to do that with Control, and that allows us to do interesting things like fix the Automate agent using the Control agent, right? Which Gavin knows all about. So we've got our own mechanism for doing that inside of IMMY now. But then people started approaching us that are using Essential, and we're like, oh crap, we don't have that. We're like, we don't care if you don't have a full integration like you do with Automate, but could you at least do some sort of integration that would allow you to install our agent, like the Datto RMM agent or the Essential agent? And I'm like, I could probably do that. So I started digging into how could I get that installer out of Essential, for example, and get that push as part of that initial computer setup. But in that case, we're still running our scripts over our own agent, and you would have done the install of our agent using the USB stick thing that installs the agent and skips out of box stuff. And then our agent will then install your RMM agent. And we do the same thing for Automate too. So what most of our clients do is they get that USB stick, they put it on the bench, new computer comes out of the box, plug it in, IMMY agent. Okay, we have the Automate agent set to go out to every single computer, no problem. That's just part of that initial sequence.
And that kind of does more than obviously just the RMM agent. It does everything that you have in IMMY essentially attached to that particular client.
Exactly. So if I had to show how this works, if I were to hit run maintenance on my, this is a really bad idea. It'll surprise me.
Darren gets kicked out of the Zoom. We know.
Yeah, y'all are gonna know
Zoom's
exactly
updating.
Yeah. So what this is doing is it's queued up the session. It's gonna pop up in a minute, and it's gonna say, oh, we're evaluating all the rules, and there's a nice little progress bar, and it's gonna show you that, and then you're gonna start seeing all the actions that need to be performed to bring my computer into compliance based on the rules that were set, to run against my machine. And of course, I'm on a beta version of our code, so this may take a minute, but you'll what I could do is pull up a session that has already happened. So if I look at a scheduled session, for example, and mine's the worst one to use. There are a million broken things that I've used to test against my own machine. But if I go to, all of these should bring it up. Show me the session. Do it.
So one of the things I'd put forward about ImmyBot and the experience that kind of I've had with it is one of the best resources that I think ImmyBot has is Darren. I see him all the time in the ImmyBot channel answering questions day and night. And when you give this man a problem, he's driven to solve it. You fire him an installer that you don't think can be installed silently and tell him, I don't think you can sort that out. He'll find a way to get that sorted out.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for the you won't, you can't. Let's see. Hardest part of IMMY development so far, function I'm most proud of. I really like the install analyzer. That's probably my favorite. The hardest part is, I would say, is just keeping up with testing. We got a large surface area of code. Now it's both the underlying code and the code, the PowerShell code that is doing all the installs. So we're actively recruiting people to be on our team to help with that and increase the overall quality of what you get inside of IMMY. Let's see. Gavin, you still there? You muted yourself.
I'm still here. I was just reading through some of the remaining questions. How does IMMY deal with time zones?
Better now. As of about a month ago, everything was relative to Central Standard Time because, the world revolves around Louisiana, according to me. But now when you go and you create a schedule, you're able to select your time zone here, and everything that you do is in that time zone. Whereas before everything was bad. It was all relative to where we were. So yeah, growing pains.
So it's nice to see some JMT support in there. Yes.
Next is internationalization for you guys with your bonnets and your crumpets and however you say
bonnets and crumpets. Yeah, that is exactly what British people have. We sit drinking tea and crumpets on top of our bonnets.
That's right.
How do you feel about time zones? Well, Drew, I'll tell you how I feel about time zones, and there's only one true time zone, and it's GMT. Moving on from that, so Darren doesn't have a chance to.
Real convenient.
Is IMMY going to support some form of MSIX app attach?
Okay, I actually don't know that much about app attach, but we will add support very soon for AppX directly. So when you upload an AppX, it'll just say, "Oh, I know how to install this," and it'll do and add a provisioning package or whatever it does to get that on the computer. We've had to do that manually for a couple of clients that we've repackaged.
So we've gone over by 10 minutes. So sorry everybody. We did have a bit more content to discuss. We have cut it a bit short. This kind of thing, it's amazing how much time actually goes into it when we start talking about things like this. But we're going to be available in the v-ImmyBot channel in the MSPGeek Slack if you've got questions or want to discuss any of the things that we've put forward here any further. Darren, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah,
with us. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Awesome. Yeah, and if anybody wants to go and spin up a trial, it's free to do. You get 30 days on it, and I would encourage you to schedule a Teams meeting with me where I kind of get your environment set up. It usually takes about an hour, and I use my test machine for just onboarding it according to what your specifications are, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing this.
Thank you. So this session will be recorded. We'll be putting it up onto the MSPGeek relevant channels in YouTube in time. And thank you everyone for coming today as well. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you join us next month for our webinar, which will be around SNMP with Nuances, the network monitoring provider. So thank you again, Darren. Thank you to all the people who are here. Have a wonderful weekend, and goodbye.
Bye.